Hey, good evening, everyone. We're still about a minute or two away from getting started, but before we do so, if someone wouldn't mind, can you access the chat tool within Zoom, or perhaps the Q&A tool, the question and answer tool? If so, type something in or raise your hand as an attendee. Hey, Ted, thanks for that. I saw your hand was raised and I unmuted you, or at least you might be able to unmute yourself. You can hear my audio, right, Ted?
I can.
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks. Great. Cool. And I see that the Q&A tool is available, but the chat tool is disabled. So all good, no worries. We'll just use the Q&A tool. Instead of the chat if you've got any questions as we go. So stand by for 1 minute and we will get started. Also, if you don't mind, if you've raised your hand just to help me with the audio testing and things, go ahead and unraise your hand. And then as we go, if you do have a question or something, just raise your hand and I'll monitor things that way. So again, we'll get started here in just a minute. All right, thanks y'all. See the comments about the view of the slide. Let me see if I can fix that real quick. Stand by. Okay, I think that may have worked there in terms of the slides that you see on your screen. Is it the long um, wide version or is it the narrow tall version? Somebody type in the Q&A or raise your hand. Ted, if you can hear me, since you helped out earlier, your view of the slides, are you okay? Can you see them?
Long and wide.
Okay, perfect. Cool. I think we are um, good to go. Thanks, Camille. Texted. It's fixed. So, first off, welcome everyone to the webinar that we're hosting. We're going to provide information on the Larimer County Community Mitigation Grant Program. So we're going to talk about the program in general, and maybe even more specifically about this year's, the 2025 cycle of grant funding. So we'll certainly have time for questions and answers and things at the end. Um, I'm Josh Roberts, Mitigation Coordinator with the Larimer County Office of Emergency Management. So again, welcome. And if you're here and you intended to learn more about our Community Mitigation Grant Program, then you're in the right place. If you accidentally stumbled upon this webinar and don't intend to be here, it's okay. You're welcome to stay anyway, but that's what we're going to be talking about. So as I go along, I'll download a lot of information to you guys on the grant program and this year's grant cycle. Certainly, if you've got questions that come up in your mind as I'm giving you all this info, definitely feel free to go into that Q&A tool there in Zoom, ask a question, and then at the end, I'll certainly come back and answer those and then at some point too, you guys can raise your hand and I can unmute you and I can manage it all that way. So um, without further ado, just let me go ahead and get started. Um, think I skipped some slides. Let me back up. Okay, here's the agenda. So really the purpose of the webinar this evening is just to give you all, potential applicants to this grant program, some good information and insights to the program, the intent behind some of the rules that we have with the program. I'll walk you through the application process that we have. And then, of course, like I mentioned, provide an opportunity for question and answers at the end. The overall intent really with this webinar, we want to help make sure that this grant opportunity for our communities, for our neighborhoods here in Lammer is just super approachable, easy to navigate. Some of you on this call, I'm sure there are some, I've seen some names that you've been past recipients of this award, so you're definitely familiar with the grant program and kind of how we run it. But there may be some of you on the line that haven't applied or haven't been a past recipient of this. So welcome and absolutely ask any question that comes to mind. And certainly we'll make sure you have my contact info. I'm also always happy to help talk offline, talk through your thoughts, or answer any questions about this. So you see on the slide, we're going to talk about an overview of the program. We'll go over some eligibility and limitations. We'll actually walk through the application form and I'll give some insight as to our evaluation criteria. And then we'll go over some other important grant administration items. I would also like to walk you guys through a story map that we have that gives some good examples of previous projects that we funded. So you and your neighborhoods, your communities can get some examples that way. And of course, we'll talk about the important dates when the application is due, the performance period, all those good things. And like I mentioned, we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. Just a couple of notes. This webinar is being recorded. So following this webinar, I don't know if we'll get to it tomorrow, but probably next week, more likely. We'll post a link to our webpage, a recording of the webinar, as well as slides that we're showing here. We'll post that stuff to our webpage. And, if there are any technical issues with audio, video, asking your question or me answering it, no worries. We can always visit offline. And like I said earlier, just talk through any questions or talk through anything you want to with respect to this program. So what is the program? Here's kind of a one slide overview. So our community mitigation program, it was created a couple of years ago, 2022. And this slide here is already incorrect. The 2024 cycle was the second annual cycle. 2025 this year is going to be the third annual cycle of this grant program. And a couple of really important points to make. This program was created because we know these two things with these little arrow bullets here. Research shows that mitigation has a positive benefit cost. I can point you to 700-page National Institute of Building Sciences study with it's peer reviewed that provides some positive ROI, return on investment. There's a talking point out there that a lot of folks like to use. Of course, with any 700-page peer-reviewed publication, there's some nuance. But the talking point is, generally speaking, for every $1 you spend on mitigation, you end up saving 6 in disaster response and recovery costs down the road. Again, there's some nuance there, but there's a lot of different ways that mitigation has a positive benefit cost when we're just talking about the finance aspect. We also know that there's research in disaster sciences that show that good social capital improves resilience. So, social capital meaning those ties that bond communities, neighbors together, those things that they share, a place, culture, all of those ties that bond us all together. As we increase those, then it's more likely we're going to have a more favorable experience in response and recovery, or at minimum, we're going to be a little bit more resilient and able to withstand the shocks and stresses that life throws at us. It takes a village, right? You guys have heard that before. I'm sure it's cliche for a reason. Same kind of principle. So on those two notes there, that are really important, that kind of established a foundation for this program. We wanted to build a program that helped along those two things. So the funding that our county leadership provides for this grant program is not only an investment in that mitigation activity that has that positive return on investment there, but it's also an investment into our neighborhoods, into our communities. And we built this program, we structured it in a way that we really want to bring neighbors together because we know what that means in disaster response and recovery. So with this program, and you see the bottom there in the green font, we hope to help remove some of the upfront and sort of entry level cost barriers at a community scale, think of it like a neighborhood scale, and to just help along some of the continued great efforts that are happening across the county in terms of that community scale, neighborhood scale organizing around this work, around disaster mitigation, around risk reduction. So, we know it's not, a huge amount of money, millions of dollars we're talking about here. It's really more targeted on getting things started at kind of that entry level. So this is especially helpful here for folks who've experienced our grant program in the past, who've been past recipients. Just kind of wanted to tone out some changes from last year. So just like last year and every year, we're always trying to figure out how we can make this grant program better, easier, more effective, more efficient, not just for you all as potential community applicants or recipients of this funding, but also on our end as well. So we've continued to just streamline some internal administrative processes to help us, make it easier for everyone and make it easier on us. We've also this year we've clarified and tweaked our evaluation criteria, and I'll talk more about all of these changes later. But we've tweaked our evaluation criteria mainly to just reduce some duplication that we had in our criteria, and that also has a trickle down effect as it makes the application even shorter. So that's good news too. From last year to this year, and I'll give it to you later. We're going to clarify the requirement that we have on recipients hosting a community meeting. So I'll talk more about that later. And of course, we're always looking for ways to improve the approachability of this grant program. So, where are those ways that we can streamline our application? We're using taxpayer dollar here, so we have to be accountable to it. But where are those opportunities where we can streamline some of the needed bureaucracy there, on that to just make it even easier? How can we improve the approachability by enhancing some of the marketing and collateral elements here? So we've updated a story map that we have. Some of you might have seen it. And we also created a short video too that kind of, describes the program and what it does, what we hope to do, which is also embedded on the story map. So I'll show that to y'all later. In terms of the funding pool, last year we were able to increase it from the previous year, and this year it remains the same as last year. So $100,000 is the amount of funds that we have in the total fund pool to provide out through all the grant awards with this program. But I also wanted to mention too, and we're always looking for ways to bring in some additional funding streams or to engage in some fund partnerships with other granting agencies. And so that continues. And so right now at this moment, I can't, tell you that we have any more than 100,000, in the pool, but we're working on trying to find some funding. No guarantees, of course, but we're always looking for that. And then finally, another really big item that's changed from last year, and I'll talk about it later, but we're updating our eligibility, especially in regards to road work. So this year, road work will not be an eligible project activity, but I'll give you more information on that here in a bit. And just a reminder, kind of to myself here, big thanks to our county leadership, our board of county commissioners, our county manager, our director of Office of Emergency Management, for their thoughts about this program and them giving us, funding here in the pool, to help deliver some of these grants, to you all in the form of the Community Mitigation Grant Program. So big thanks to them and their investment here. Also, big shout out to those of you that are past recipients of the program. We're taking, as all the conversations I have with all of you, all of that feedback is great, and it's on those feedback that we receive, on that feedback that we receive. Though that's a big reason for why some of these changes that we're making to just try to make things easier. We're always looking to improve. So thanks all for that. All right. So let's talk a little bit about eligibility and some of the limitations of the program here. The first thing to mention is, well, who's eligible to apply? And so you see on the screen that first bullet, eligible applicants include community groups, local nonprofit organizations, and local charitable foundations. Now, what do you mean when you say community groups? So it's kind of a loose definition, but essentially it's an entity or entities that are representing the community in some way. So whether that's a neighborhood or a common interest association like an HOA or a road and recreation association, it could also be a fire department, right? Or a local nonprofit that we're working with. So there is some gray area there when it comes to how we might define community groups. But I'll tell you, the intent of this funding is really to send some of this funding to our neighborhoods or to communities for their benefit. So if it's if there's a fire department, for example, that serves multiple neighborhoods, that's okay. We want to try to find a way to yes, but just know that the funding ultimately, no matter who the sponsoring fiscal agent is, or who is the person or persons that puts together the proposal and the application, we want this funding to go to communities. So just a little bit of I thought I'd clarify that a little bit more, give you a little bit more info there. And of course, that second little arrow bullet there at the bottom, in general, small grassroots community group, they're going to take priority over larger nonprofits. Some of it also, as it also kind of depends on, when I say priority and take priority, it kind of depends on the number of proposals we get and the strength of those proposals against our evaluation criteria, which I'll talk to you about in a little bit. The amount of funding overall that folks are asking for. So it's a competitive grant program like many others. So we have an application period where we receive these proposals and then we evaluate those proposals, a team of us, in accordance with that criteria, and we essentially prioritize or rank, the proposals against those criteria. And just know that those proposals that are stemming from and that are asking for funding for that grassroots level neighborhood community group, that's gonna be a little bit more favorable in terms of the competitiveness of the proposal as opposed to those that aren't. Projects, they've got to be located in Larimer County. The projects, they've got to mitigate risk from one or more hazards. Awards are usually limited to 10,000 per project. Note this language change here. Last year, we for sure capped it out at 10,000 per project max. This year, um, and it's kind of hard to say, but I mentioned earlier we're trying to find some other funding streams to help plus up this program and what we can do. But we don't have those yet. But we're working on it. And if we do, then there's a good chance that we can provide, maybe more than $10,000 on any given project. It's not going to be a whole lot more. And it kind of depends on the type of project and the funding stream and what's allowed there. But I think we wanted to be intentional with this language because, for example, last year we received well over the total requested amount of funding, well over the $100,000 pool that we had, and so we couldn't fully award everyone. We partially awarded, a lot of recipients. But if we had had more money in the pool, then there's a chance that we could have awarded, those proposals a little bit more. So um, and again, there's nothing beyond just 100,000 in the pool total that we have right now. It's just something that we're always working on. So if you're thinking about your proposal, I would kind of target that $10,000 amount of an ask. But if it's a bigger ask or a more funding in the whole project overall, definitely let us know that. And if we're able to get other funding, then we'll try to see what we can do. But I hope that didn't confuse anyone there. Happy to answer questions afterwards to clarify that. But yeah, just some additional info around that item. So what's not eligible? Things like food and drink. You can't use these grant funding if awarded to purchase those items. Funding for staff capacity or funding to pay some of your staff at an organization, whether it's a common interest association, a fire department, a nonprofit organization, full-time or part-time staff, we can't pay for any part of their salaries or their staff time as part of this funds. And project planning expenses. You might for example, if you're buying lunch or printing materials to gather up your neighbors to talk about this project and what kind of proposal you guys may want to put in for, those are project planning expenses, and we can't reimburse those things. Those things aren't eligible. And also, maybe one of the biggest changes here, what's not going to be eligible this year is road work. And to clarify this, when we say road work, that's not eligible, here's what we're talking about. Any project activity that involves repairing a road, maintenance of the road, grading it again, widening the road, things like turnouts, those kind of things are no longer eligible for this program. But the road work, some may define it a little bit differently. So the only exception to this non-eligible rule here are things like roadside thinning of fuels of roadside treatments, or we've had a number of communities do things like bring slash piles to the roadside, and then with our grant funding, a contractor is hired to come through and chip and scatter or chip and haul those slash piles. So if you're stacking slash piles at the roadside, that's eligible as well. Um, those are really the only exceptions. And if you guys have any questions or need any more clarification on that, again, happy to answer those questions at the end, or we can talk through it offline. All right, so the application and evaluation criteria. Let's spend some time talking about it. So you apply by completing an online form. I have it linked here. I'll post the slides afterwards. This link is also on our webpage, and we'll go through it in just a second. The application period is going to close 11:59 p.m. Sunday, March 9th this year. So be sure that you submit your application before that time frame. Also, one of the things that we might recommend, it's not necessary by any means, but just in case there's some issues with the technology or the online form and submitting it, we recommend that, and in our application form and linked here is just a PDF document that gives you all the questions in the application that we ask. So I might recommend that in developing your proposal, just open up a Microsoft Word document separately, draft your proposal, and save it before you fill out our online form, just so that you have it. And that way, in case there's something that goes wrong with the online form, you still have your proposal there, and we can work with you and accept it that way. So just a tip there. So let's actually, I want to walk through the application form with you. Super easy, won't take a long time, but bear with me while I share um, that form real quick. All right. So you now should be seeing our webpage that we have for the grant program. And so if you scroll down this how to apply section, please use the online application form to submit your application. You click this link and it pulls up just an online web form. Just some helpful information. Here is where you can also, if you click this link here, you can see the application fields document that you can save to your desktop, and then that way you have all of the application questions in advance. But let's go through the form here. It's pretty easy, y'all. So project name, just type in a name of your project. These are just some examples here. Check a hazard that would be mitigated. Most of the time, the proposals that we've received, they've intended to mitigate the wildfire hazard. Input in this amount, in this box here, this field here, how much funding you're requesting. The grantee, if awarded, or the name of the community or the organization that you are submitting this proposal or this application on behalf of, whatever the name of that neighborhood or community group or might be. You hit next. Type in your first and last name, your email, your phone number. If there is someone else that's helping or your tag team and working together on this proposal, definitely include their info as well. The payment address, so whoever your fiscal sponsoring entity will be, it's the HOA, the Road and Rec Association, the fire department. Give us their address. And here's where you start building your, letting us know about the type of project, your proposal here. So the location of the project. If you've got an address, add that in there. If it's if you want to hire a contractor to do some, thinning treatments of a community open space, feel free to just give the cross street reference or just any sort of description on where the project might be located. If your project, might work on a couple of different community open space treatments, or if it's, acquiring a trailer to help with the transport and dump of slash that's generated from treatments, and there's not really an address, just pick an address in your community, in your neighborhood that makes the most sense, or be descriptive to the best extent possible. In this section, in terms of the scope, here tell us a little bit about your proposed project. What are you wanting to do? And really, as much information as you can give on the budget, and what the funds you're asking us for, what they will be spent on, that's really the most important thing. So if you want to do a sort of a multi-pronged project in your neighborhood and you want to hire a contractor to um, thin a 1 acre lot as kind of an example, a community owned lot, and that's going to cost $4,000. Well, tell us $4,000 for purposes of hiring a contractor to do some fuels thinning. And then let's say the other aspect of it is you wanted $1,000 for construction material, to build a shed for a tool library, that you can chainsaws and things that you can check out to neighbors. Well, tell us $1,000 for the materials to build a tool library, a shed for a tool library. Like, tell us what you're asking the money for, right? That's really the big thing. In this field here, the need, give us a little bit more info on why you are asking us for this funding here to help you with this project. These next sections here, these are really important because these basically, the answers you give here are going to directly, we're going to review these answers directly against our evaluation criteria. And so I'll give you the tip here on how to answer these questions. So this field, how will this proposed project contribute to community resilience and risk reduction? So click this link and it takes you back to our the web page here. And I want you to scroll down to this section, grant criteria. There's two criteria. That's one. And then here's the other. And we tell you how many points these criteria, maximum points are that you can get with respect to our evaluation. So on this first, and I'll switch back, apologies here, but this first question, how will this proposed project contribute to community resilience and risk reduction? You go back to that criteria, overall contribution to community resilience and risk reduction as a result of the project. And this is what we mean specifically. Answer these questions. Just give us this information in that answer on the application. That's going to make it easy for us to review your proposal against our established criteria, and it gives you an idea of exactly the kind of information we're hoping that you'll provide in terms of answering this question. Same for the next field. Describe the extent of community involvement and the degree of partnerships for both the project that you're proposing and for future mitigation efforts. So if you go back to our page, this next criteria here, community involvement and degree of partnerships. This is exactly what we're wanting you to answer. So we're trying to make this super easy. There's no hidden agendas here. We're trying to be very transparent about what we're looking for in a proposal and what we're going to view favorable and score favorably, certainly in compared to all the rest of the proposals we see here. So those are important. Then if there's anything additional you want to add, go ahead and add it. Let us know if it's possible for you to consider a smaller funding amount than what's being requested. Meaning if you're asking for 10,000, but you'll take 5,000 to accomplish your project goals, tell us that. The reason why that's important, I'll go back to last year. I think we received 21 proposals total that I said the total amount was well beyond the amount of funding that we had to give out. But what we were able to do is we were able to award 19 of those proposals at a smaller degree, so at a smaller amount. So let us know if that's something that will work for you. And if it won't work for you, then let us know that too. Let me uh, answer here. Let me just pretend like I'm typing in some answers so that I can advance to the next page. The next page, this right here, if you're working with a partner nonprofit organization or your fire department, or if your HOA wants to provide a letter of support to your project, just email it to me, email it to us. And this is my email right there. If you've got any other supporting documentation, such as, hey, here's a printout of the wildfire risk in our neighborhood according to, this online source, or whatever you think is going to help make the case for your proposal and for us to view it favorably, just feel free to email it to us. After that, submit, and that's it. You're done with the application. It's really not a difficult application, and we want to try to make it easy for you so that we can be in a better position to work with you to find a way to yes to award your project. So we don't want some long drawn out application process. We're trying to make this thing super easy, but still capture all the information we need to capture to justify things on our end. All right, so let me stop share of that screen and resume share of the PowerPoint slides. All right, you should now be seeing the PowerPoint slides again. So that was the application form there. I showed you the evaluation criteria, and I want to kind of give you some particular points here. The points of those two evaluation criteria, we're going to give preference to projects that include multiple stakeholders with evidence of large community buy-in and support and participation, as opposed to if there's just a couple of neighbors getting together, right? I mean, this grant program really is designed to catalyze the improvement of that social capital, to bring neighbors together, to kind of incite that collaboration of all in the community or the community on a whole, because we know ultimately that's going to make a big difference. Should the worst case happen, right? Should your community be impacted by a disaster? So know that. Just another helpful tip and insight there. So here's our evaluation criteria. And that slide I just showed you, this first evaluation criteria point here, that's worth 5 points in the way that we are scoring these. The second one is worth 10 points. So just to double down, really make sure you're doing a good job of describing how the breadth and depth of the support and neighbors in this project participate and supporting it with you. That's going to be viewed favorably in accordance with our criteria. All right, so a couple of other important administration items. I mentioned it earlier, but I want to state it again. As a general rule, this grant program, it operates on a reimbursement basis. So in other words, you as a community, neighborhood, whoever your fiscal sponsor is, that you pay for the work, do the work, and then you'll have to give us documentation that proves you paid for it, and that it proves that it was the work that we said that we were giving you funding for. So it's going to be a reimbursement basis. Now that's a general rule. Now I will say though, there have been times, there haven't been a lot, but if you can't find that fiscal sponsor, maybe we can help connect you with someone who can do that for you, or who's willing to do that for you. And if not, then maybe perhaps we can work with you on um, us just paying for the cost. But I tell you, that's only in sort of exigent circumstances there. That's only, it's not the general rule, it's an exception. We've done it a few times in the past. Again, we want to try to find our way to yes to help out our neighborhoods, to help out our communities here in Larimer. But generally, just know that this is a reimbursement basis thing. The next bullet, if you, let's say you give us a proposal, you submit the application, and we review all of the applications and we determine, hey, we want to award this one, then that next step is we'll give you an intent to award, and then we'll basically ask, if you accept this award, here's a simple one-page little agreement document between us and your community and your fiscal agent or whoever's sponsoring you, that you're only going to use the funding on XYZ thing, what you told us, what you asked us the funding for. So there will be some kind of agreement formally where we're going to ask you to sign and send that back to us before the award's finalized. This last bullet here. So I mentioned it earlier, a slight change this year. We want to clarify this rule we have around requiring a community meeting. Again, in this case, if you're selected for an award, one of the requirements that we're going to have is you got to have some kind of community meeting where you talk about the project. You got to let us, OEM, know about this meeting when you're having it. And we're going to do our level best to try to be there to support you, to support the effort, to help you answer any questions from folks that might be coming at you. We can't make it to all of them. There's a limited, amount of us, but we're going to do our level best. So the change from, last year to this year is this year, just we want to clarify this community meeting that we're going to ask you to have if you're awarded. That can happen at any time during the performance period. So after you're awarded and before we tell you you got to, close everything out. It doesn't necessarily have to be as a kickoff before you do anything. So, for example, if you have an annual meeting of your road and rec association, and that happens in late July, well, it's okay. That is just fine. If you want to talk about this project there at that meeting, that'll work. It's a community meeting where everybody's invited to, right? So just know it's nothing that you have to do on the front end before you do any project activity, as long as it happens at some point in the performance period. Some other administration items here. If you apply and we evaluate it and we want to award you, we'll send you that award agreement. You sign and send back. And remember, in that agreement, it's going to specify, what you can do, what the funding is for, right? If that changes, so let's say, for example, your project is hiring a contractor to bring a chipper and a truck by to chip up slash piles that folks throughout the neighborhood do work on their property and bring them to the roadside, then that'll be specified generally in that agreement. And let's say a couple months go by and you haven't necessarily done that. You change your mind, and all of a sudden, you now feel like the best thing for your community is to um, buy some chainsaws for a community mitigation crew. Well, that's changed from your proposal, right? From your application. So before you do that, you got to check in with us to make sure we approve the change of that scope. Because if you don't, and you just kind of go and spend the money and don't get our approval about the change, then you run the risk of whenever you submit reimbursement paperwork to us, you run the risk of us saying, no, we can't reimburse you because that wasn't in the approved scope, right? So the point here is if your project changes from your initial application and budget and the grant agreement that we have, if you want to change it, sometimes things happen and that's okay. You just got to let us know first so that we have a chance to review it, talk to you about it, and then give you that written approval so that you can make that change and expend those dollars to get reimbursed later. The second bullet, when requesting reimbursement, we're going to ask you for receipts or proof of payment, for that approved activity or whatever we're giving you the funds for, just as documents that substantiate on our end that we have to maintain record of, that we have to hold on to kind of prove that, yep, we provided the money to this community for this purpose. So just know, keep your receipts, keep that, get that proof of payment there. We're going to be asking for that. And then the final thing here, at the end, we're going to ask you to submit a pretty easy, quick final report. It's another online form to just let us know how it went. If you got any feedback, about the program, about any of our processes. And of course, we're going to ask you for photos or videos of the project before, during, and after, because we want to help tell your story with that media there. And you'll see in our story map, or if you haven't seen it yet, or in the video that we conducted, we were able to use some of that to really market and tell the good story of all this great work that you guys are doing. Another couple items. If your proposal uh, is going to mean work on someone's private property, then you've got to get permission from that property owner, right? It's their land, it's their property. You nor us, right, can do anything without their express permission. So we'll work with you. If you got any questions about that, can give you some example right of entry forms, or just sort of release or permission forms for things like that. But just know, our granting of any award, to any of you, it does not mean that anybody can go on someone else's property and do something without their permission, right? So just know that if it comes to that, we'll work with you too to give you some templates. But no, you got to have their permission. And then this final thing, we kind of reserve the right to, if we want to visit your project, if we want to come say hi, have a cup of coffee with you, um, we kind of reserve that right if we're giving you some of those funds there. And also, if we need any info from you about the project, we might ask it. So make sure you provide it. All of those things. Obviously, if you got heartburn, then you again run the risk of us not being able to, reimburse you for any of those things. So pretty simple stuff, y'all. Really, this is nothing that's out of the realm of typical for these kind of grants, or for grants in general. So some example projects. If you haven't seen this story map, I want to run through it real quick with you. So let me share my other screen again. Stand by. All right. So if you go to our web page, this story map right here, you can look at it embedded in the page, or you can click this link to bring it up full size, full screen. Feel free to scan this, learn more about the program, get a little bit more insight. Here's the video that we made to kind of help tell the good story of the program and the work that you all are doing. Feel free to watch it. And also, let me just showcase a couple of projects. So Upper Poudre Canyon Association last year, they had a great project. A lot of our folks, all of you guys had great projects. But this one we decided to showcase a little bit. What their project was, just an example, it was folks in the community sort of volunteered their time. They had some community work days to where they fell some trees, limbed up trees, raked, removed some fuels around these really important community buildings. They also hired a contractor to do a little bit of work. The fire district there has a chipper. They let them use that. That chipper was used to help with the work. And they also built a shed that's going to house a little tool shed next to the building there, to house a mitigation tool library. So that's just an example, multi-pronged project. But as you notice, a lot of community members were involved. People came together, worked together. They had a good time doing it. So just an example. You can also click this map on the story map to see throughout the 3 years all of the different projects that have been awarded, and just get a little bit more information on them. Here's just a running list. And here on this story map is just a quick tour of last year's project. So I'll run through them, really quickly. Good folks at Big Elk Meadows. They acquired some additional tools for their tool library that they kind of use, and they do some volunteer mitigation projects a handful of times a year. To include this time, they were able to acquire a stump grinder that they're hanging on to. Carriage Hills was some community. Do some work on your property, bring your limbs and your slash to the roadside, and our funding helped to pay a contractor to come through and chip up those slash piles. That happened a number of times. It was a few different projects last year. uh, Folks up at Crystal Lakes. They hired a contractor and did some roadside thinning on a really pinch point kind of road there in the community. And they also, of course, they got a number of folks up there in the community that live or have property up there gathered together, and they did some volunteer mitigation work days as well. Um, Fall River Estates HOA were able to hire a contractor to do some mitigation of some of the community outlots there. Good folks, Glacier View, were able to acquire this dump trailer here. They've got, as part of the fire department, community mitigation volunteers to do some mitigation work throughout the district. So this piece of equipment, makes their job a little bit easier, and so on and so forth. So if I've skipped over your project here, so sorry. Doesn't mean that it wasn't a good one. We had some great projects last year. I'm just showing these as an example of the kinds of projects that you can start thinking around, or getting aspects from as you develop your proposal. So bear with me. Let me share the PowerPoint again. And not too much longer here, folks. So we'll wrap up pretty soon and give some time for questions. All right. Important dates. They're all on our website as well. Application period's open now. You can apply tonight if you wanted. The application period is going to close, like I mentioned, March 9th, 11:59 p.m. So be sure to get your proposal in before that time. What we're going to do too is, following that application period close date, then that's when our evaluation team will look at all the proposals, evaluate them against the criteria, and just kind of prioritize or rank those. We're going to do all of that, and we're going to then reach out to folks who we want to award and secure that agreement. We're going to do all that before May 1st. That way, the summertime, May through October, that's your period of time to do the work, right? To complete your project. And then at the end, that's called the performance period. And then at the end, all of your reimbursement documentation, your receipts, the photos, of course, the project itself, all the work, the final report. We're going to ask for all of that to be done and back to us by November 3rd. So 11:59 p.m., November 2nd, that's the end of the performance period. We cycle these grants on an annual basis. We open them up at the first of the year, do some review, and make the award determinations in springtime. Summertime, and most of fall there is the time for you to do the work and close everything out. And then we've got to reconcile all the financial things and finish everything up in November, December timeframe. So that's the important dates and timeframes. So I think I got everything there, but now I want to hear if I've missed anything or hear your question. So what you can do is, let me see here. Let me bring up my participants. So type your question into the Q&A tool, or raise your hand and I'll unmute you to see if you had a question. But let me just go ahead and start answering some of the questions I see in the Q&A tool. So I see a question from Ed, or maybe a statement. Hi, Ed. We're a small neighborhood group, organized as a limited liability company. You operate as a not for profit, but it takes years. It takes a while to get an official IRS 501 designation there. No problem. I think you are an eligible applicant, and as such, also likely are an eligible fiscal agent as well. So that's not an issue. Um, there. Hope I answered that question. Another question we got. Are heavy fuels, forest products, prioritized over neighborhoods with fine fuels, introduced or invasive thatched grass? That answer is no. We don't necessarily prioritize the type of hazard to mitigate or, um, those things. What might be priority and it may be is, or what we might look at is the degree to which your project will help reduce that risk. But again, that's 5 of the total 15 points. The biggest chunk of what we want to hear about in your application is you're bringing neighbors together, right? You've got some pretty widespread participation. So it's a really good question. And no, I would say we're not going to prioritize, um, you know, forests or heavy fuels over, more fine fuels. It's all risk there. Good question. Another question, will this recorded presentation be available online where we can direct people to? Absolutely. We'll probably get it up online next week, but I have everyone who registered for this webinar. I've got all your email addresses, so we can send you a follow-up, next week when we do get those things posted. And also feel free to just check back to our webpage there too. All right, I think that's all the questions in the chat. Now let me look to see if we've got anybody's hand raised. Hey Ted, I see your hands raised. You should be able to unmute. Do you have a question or anything you want to say?
I do not.
Gotcha. Thanks, Ted. No problem. Uh, Michael, Michael Klingon, go ahead. I see your hand is raised, but it might have been there from the start. But let me feel free to unmute if you need. Okay, got it. Thanks, Michael. Unraised your hand there. Doug, go ahead. Your hand's raised. You should be able to unmute. You there, Doug? Uh-oh. Doug, I see you're unmuted, but I can't hear you. There's a couple more questions too. So Doug, if we're having trouble with audio difficulties, you can type your question in the Q&A tool if you want, or just give me a shout. We can talk offline too. Either way. Let's see. Cheryl, you should be able to unmute now.
Hi, Josh. Cheryl here. We're over in Estes Park. We've got about 10 units over where we live, and we've had the fire department out to do fire mitigation analysis of our neighborhood, and there is quite a bit of work to be done here. Most important is we have over 20 large juniper trees, and we've got a quote from a contractor, a tree guy, because it's nothing that as homeowners, we can go out there with our chainsaws and cut these bigger trees down. Is that something that would be eligible for this grant?
It's a great question, and thanks for the question, Cheryl. Um, maybe. So, and the reason why I say maybe, it depends on whose trees they are and where those trees might be in terms of, is it on someone's like a private property lot, or is it in like a community owned lot, right? So if it's a community owned lot, then I think, whoever owns that, that I'm assuming it's an HOA, right, that owns that community owned lot, as long as they're good with it, then sure. If it's on a private property lot, and it might be good that we talk offline to learn a little bit more detail, but one of the challenges with that is, you mentioned 20 juniper trees. I think it was the number. Is that 20 people, and are there 50 people that live in their neighborhood? Well, what about those other 30 people? Do they have juniper trees? Like, how are we being fair about it? But if you have any further kind of info there, happy to, if you want to ask a follow-up. It's just my initial thoughts.
Okay, well, so there's 10 homes in here, and we've held two HOA meetings about the juniper trees because the fire department recommended that we get rid of them all. And we had a meeting on Tuesday of this week, and it was voted to remove all the trees.
Okay. Yeah. So I think what I heard, and correct me if I got any of this wrong, Cheryl, but you've got um, 10 properties, right, up there. So presumably there's a number of juniper trees on, any given property.
Mhm.
And so if it's everyone, I think that's pretty fair, right? I mean, everyone in the community and the neighborhood, might receive benefit from something like this. So I think that's possible. Now I think we gotta consider, what was the cost quote that you got? How much money would it cost to fell those trees? I know some of that can be pretty technical there, especially if they're close to the house, and so it might be a decent penny. It might be more than 10,000. So now it's a matter of, well, which ones are you going to prioritize and to make
Mhm.
sure that's fair, to all, right?
Yeah,
So,
and we want to do some laddering also and some general, fire mitigation cleanup. So
yep,
I think we have a good sense of what we need. We just have to figure out how we're going to get the money to help us.
yep,
So
yep, totally.
Mm.
Well, hopefully that was somewhat helpful to you. Again, happy to talk with you offline and clarify some things, but
Extremely
really,
helpful, Josh. Thank you so much.
yeah, of course. Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for being interested in asking the question here. I think with that, that's a good case there for me to kind of just tell everyone. One of the things we'll be looking for is we want to try to help. I mentioned the intent to bring neighbors together, right? Not to create division or to, create any sort of, well, why did they get help and not me? So really think through, especially when you're wanting to do some work on an individual's or, a person's private lot. How can you make sure that that's fair to the whole community? That's really what we're going to be looking at here. This funding is intended to go to neighborhoods or communities, not necessarily individuals, right? I mean, I know individuals may, of course, receive some benefit from these things, but first and foremost, our intent is go to a neighborhood scale, community scale kind of thing. And, Cheryl, one thing I might just mention again, just something to be mindful of. If, that's the kind of proposal that you guys are looking at building and want some financial assistance on, uh, I can give you some templates to secure permissions from those private property owners too that allows those things. That's going to be important, not just for us, but for you as well, in case something happens, right? In case that tree falls in maybe a way that it shouldn't. So just might
Wonderful.
offer that.
Wonderful. Appreciate that, Josh.
Yeah, of course. All right, let me see. We had a couple more questions come in the Q&A tool. Um, here's a question. To build flexibility for small equipment, can we state that X amount of dollars will go to vegetation management tools? I think what that question is that instead of saying like really specifically, we're going to buy um, two Husqvarna chainsaws, three pairs of loppers, two pole saws that are battery operated, and a stump grinder, right? Instead of being specific, I think what I hear is you want to say we need X amount of dollars for vegetation management tools. I think that is okay, but what I might, suggest is give us a little bit more information. I mean, I think I understand that question, but it's also fairly easy to just go online, get an estimate of something, provide those estimates to come up with your dollar amount. And then, for example, if you later decide, hey, we don't want three chainsaws and three pole saws, we actually want five chainsaws and one pole saws, that's not a huge issue. And that can also just be something as simple as shoot me an email to just say, hey, we want to buy more chainsaws, less pole saws with the funding. Are you okay with that? And we'll say, of course. So hopefully that answers that question there. Another question. Oh, hey, Doug, I see your question here. Sorry for the audio difficulty. But Doug asked if we get some professional contractor estimates to do some mitigation work, thinning work, and then you have some residents who are willing to do that work for a lot less. Can you pay them? That answer, I want to say, is yes. I think. Let me think through this, Doug, a little bit. Of course, we want to try to provide good value with the funding, right? So if you can accomplish the same amount, more work with the same amount of funds, that's not a bad thing, right? That's a good thing. Or even if you have um, the funds and you do the work for less, and now you have more fun to think about, more funds to think about, or is there anything else you want to do? Like those things are okay. So I think that answer is a yes. Now, what we don't want to do is turn this grant program into how can I say it? Just a way for folks in the neighborhood to like make money. It may not be coming out the right way, but if there are folks that like have their own business, and do that work or can do that work. I think in your case, Doug, I mean, the road association may be, the fiscal agent. So are those folks that you'd be willing to pay, right? So I think that answer is a yes, but hopefully that gives you some clarity. If not, we could totally talk offline. So thanks, Doug. Another question. We'd like to consider a fire break in our community open space. Can it also be a multiple use and be a community trail? Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way to, help reduce some of the fuels, reducing that risk. And at the same time, you now got a nice little walking path in the woods that people can walk through and appreciate, the our beautiful surrounds, your beautiful surrounds. So I think that's a great idea. I might also add, if you're thinking of hiring a contractor, and that's what our funds would be used for, to pay them to do the treatments. Think about getting community members to volunteer to kind of do some easier tree felling or limit up or just general cleaning along the trail, or construct a little interpretive sign at the head of the trail that talks about importance of wildfire preparedness and this project or things like this. These would be all great ideas, I think, to include in that proposal that really helps make your proposal, your application pretty competitive. So good idea. Hey, Michael, see your question. Any thoughts on getting some fuels mitigation work done immediately versus building capacity to do potentially more work long term? So, meaning hiring a chipper service now versus buying a chipper trailer or tool library, presumably for that longer term capacity. Um, both are eligible, right? And some thoughts on, obviously, if you have the community wherewithal and the folks to do that work, not just hiring somebody to do it this year, right? But to do it over years and to maintain that, then I mean that's great, right? And that there's a part on that the application, that criteria number 2, that talks about like buy-in for future mitigation work, and I think that would speak great to that part as well. So yeah, I think that's my thoughts. But no, they're both eligible, right? And there's I certainly don't want to downplay, or if the desire is to hire a contractor to do the work. Well, some of these folks most of these folks that are doing this kind of work, in our neighborhoods, live in the neighborhoods themselves, or they live nearby. I mean, they're fellow Larimer County residents just like us, right? So if this helps them and their business and grow this capacity for that kind of work, then that's important and valuable to you, right? So both are eligible. Good question. Thanks for letting me give my thoughts there. And Doug, I got you. You'll give me a shout with more details. Awesome. Always enjoy talking to you. So All right. I think that might be all of the questions. I'll pause for a few more seconds to see if anybody raises their hand or if another question comes in. I think I just closed out my slide accidentally. All right. Camille, I actually see your hand raised. Anything you want to mention, Camille? Go ahead. You should be able to unmute.
Hi, yeah, Camille, I work here for Larimer OEM for other individuals on the call here with us. I had a question from a community member that I met with a couple weeks ago. And apologies if this got brought up. I had to step away for a split second, but there was questions on the eligibility of multiple repeat applicants, especially within the same geographic area. So, um, what I'm
Yep.
trying to ask is if a specific geographic area has been awarded like 2 years in a row already, and then a third applicant, I don't know, the a third applicant for the third year, um, is in a similar area, but it's technically a different applicant, but it's in the same geographic space. Are they automatically ineligible, or because they're technically a third different entity, they count? I feel like there was a way more succinct way to ask that question, but that's what came out. So,
Uh,
I,
it's all
you
right.
know what I'm trying to ask. So I
I
know it's
do.
something we've talked about a little bit. So just trying to bring that up and get those questions answered for those community members.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for bringing that up, Camille. And I think I don't even know if I mentioned that earlier, but I put it back on the slide that we had to talk about this. Great question. Thanks. So we have this rule with this grant program, right? That applicants can only be awarded twice in a 3-year period. And on your screen, here's the why, right? We want to help build momentum, and a community sense of agency for this work longer term, right? And we want to try to spread it out to all corners, of the county. So, if that's why the rules in place. That way, the folks who get real good at the proposals and writing these things, we don't just keep giving the money over and over and over to them at the detriment, or when we can't get, meaning we couldn't give it somewhere else, right, to another neighborhood. So that's why. But there is a little bit of gray area there, right? So let's talk about it. So the intent really is to, um, I mentioned earlier about this funding going to neighborhoods or benefiting neighborhoods or communities, right? No matter who the fiscal agent is or who works on the proposal, that's the intent. So to some extent, yeah, if the funding, even though it may change exactly who the applicant is, but ultimately goes to the same group of people, the intent is to try to spread that around, right? But occasionally there may be something like, well, 2 years in a row, it was XYZ um, community group that applied, and it went to neighborhood 1 and 2, where this third year, it is maybe the road association that serves not just neighborhood 1 and 2, but neighborhood 1, 2, and 3, right? So kind of the same spots, but it also includes different folks as well. So I think that is not necessarily going to be ineligible right off the bat, right? I mean, tell us about these things and talk to us. Another instance is, let's say there's a community or a group of neighborhoods that have received an award a couple of years in a row, but this time they want to put in another award that's going to maybe it's for training, right? For safe how to safely operate a chainsaw for training. And what if that training that's conducted is open to folks in other neighborhoods too, right? So, I mean, I think that's not necessarily right off the bat ineligible. I mean, I think we want to try to find, a way to, yes, these proposals and these applications, your projects, we want them to be built from the ground up, right? We don't necessarily want to tell you what you should do. You know that best, right? So build them from the ground up. If you're not sure about things and want to talk through it, just give us a shout, and we'll try to help find that way to yes. Another thing that's probably worth mentioning, in those cases, right, to where it's um, the same, but mostly, but maybe some new areas, in that third year in a row. We're also just, remember, we're going to view all of these applications, all of these proposals and these projects from every, one that puts one in. It's competitive. So we're going to view and review and evaluate your proposal in relation to other proposals as well. So if we've got 50 proposals that far exceeds the amount of funding we could provide, and the large majority of them, are new neighborhoods, right? Then that you may not necessarily be ranked high enough because your area has been the recipient of this funds 2 years in a row. So a little bit of gray area there. Great question, Camille. Great point. Thanks for bringing that up, and thanks to those who've ask you about it. And again, if you want to talk through these things a little bit more, just give us a shout, and we're happy to work with you as best we can. So, cool. Okay. Well, I don't think I see um, any other questions. So, um, again, I'll post these slides and the recording when it's done, when it's prepared, to our webpage. I have everyone's email address. I'll send a follow-up email when those things are posted, and make sure you know how to access these materials here. And yeah, it's been great. Thanks for your time this evening. Thanks for the great questions and your interest in the program. Like I said, we want to try to work with you to do our level best to find a way to yes for your neighborhood, for your community. And we also want to be fair to all. So don't hesitate, give us a shout, send us an email. Yeah, and we can go from there. So thank you all. Good luck in your proposal crafting. And yeah, feel free to give us a shout. Have a good evening.